Good evening, everyone. Blue Origin has a new employee stock plan, but not everyone is thrilled. What's that about? Alphabet, the parent company of Google, announced its expected haul from the SpaceX IPO. It's pretty interesting. Turion Space has raised millions and snagged the Andromeda contract while they were at it. Blue Origin is a step closer to launching from Vandenberg. Time magazine announced their list of the 100 most influential people, and one of them is one of us. NASA selected Voyager for the seventh private mission to the ISS. Amazon buys Globalstar for 11.57 billion. Kepler awarded a $30.1 million contract for the ESA Hydron optical network. And Opterus was awarded 10.2 million by NASA to engineer a solar sail propulsion system. All that and our guest, Dr. Marc Levinson. From the news desk at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, my name is Thomas Andrew Olson, and this is The Unknown Quantity. And as always, this program is brought to you by the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. And who are we and what do we do? Well, we're a US-based nonprofit organization, 501c3. We champion and strengthen emerging space startups and space-adjacent enterprises worldwide through advisory, access, and advocacy. Our pitch events and world-class boot camps, among a lot of other things we do, fortify startups to be better investor ready. Now, a lot of our work, especially this podcast, is supported by our listeners and fans like you. So just go to cscf.space/support and click that Plain as Day donate button. A little in the tip jar each month makes a big difference. And don't forget to like and subscribe, of course, and tell your friends. Bring them along. It's fun. It's fun here. We're a great place. Speaking of friends, my oldest space friend, Michael Lane, who mishandled his burning sword today and scorched himself, is here with me. Michael, come on in, man. Dude, it had to hurt.
Hey, how's things?
Oh, it's all right. It's all right.
Yeah?
Yeah, other than doing infectious disease control here at the house, we're,
Oh,
yeah.
she's
We're
not
still
doing
trying to figure
right.
out what's going on with, doctors in, doctors out, blood
Right.
work, and, all this stuff's going on.
Yikes! I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. Give her my best. Hope
Yep,
she's doing all right.
absolutely. Yeah.
It's a lovely day here in Seattle. I don't get
Mhm.
to say that very often, but it's been pretty great the last couple days. So hopefully, kind of cold and flu season is starting
Yeah.
to wind down on this side.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
you wanna jump into it.
Yeah,
Oh.
one of the bigger space events of the world happened this week. We have nothing to show for it. There's a lot of our we have a lot of friends over there. We didn't hear a peep from any of them. I guess they're having too much fun.
Right.
The only thing I got was a blurb in my email from Space News, and they did little 3 and 4 line things from a lot of different stuff to go down and the only one I remember off the top of my head is they had a panel of all the guys that are doing private commercial space stations, because they were doing pushback. It was a big pushback panel because NASA's been claiming they're going to go ahead with the commercial space stations, but their program, but they're not seeing a lot of commercial demand.
Okay.
And all these guys and and Axiom and Voyager and Vast are all going, hey, wait a minute.
Wait, yeah.
Our analysis. Why do you think we're spending all this money? Come on.
Right. We're not giving this stuff away, right? We want to we think there's requirements out there, demand for it.
Yeah.
Lots of folks are trying to build various flavors of of space.
Yeah, I think they really are intent because they know when ISS goes, we don't want a gap
No.
in whether it's commercial or not.
Right.
We don't want a gap in space habitation. We've been
Right.
inhabiting
25
something for
years.
decades now,
Keep going.
and so we want to keep that going. And if the private sector has at least shown a willingness to try to,
Right.
pick up the
Right.
baton.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to give them their lead and
All
the
the
benefit of
support.
the doubt and all our hopes and see where it takes us.
Yeah.
Because if they do it right, it's going to be amazing. And then we move on from there. We move on to the moon like so quickly.
Well, and there's a lot of them too, right? There's 6 if we're tracking it correctly. Axiom, Voyager, Blue Origins, Reef,
That,
Orbital Reef, Vast, Max.
yep.
Somebody that I can't.
Somebody's name I can't remember, but I know they're there. They're close personal friends of mine.
and now there's 2 different groups or 3 different groups trying to build out stations on the moon also, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be something that I say came out of symposium was people are going to live and work in space. That's a thing.
And yes, that needs to happen a lot because they're like 54 years late.
Right. Overdue. A little bit overdue.
Come on. I mean, look at me. I'm a wreck. Look at me. I've been waiting all these years. My God.
My God.
Okay. Well, gosh. And the faithful are coming in. They're coming in. Veronica, you're hi.
Hey.
Welcome, my dear. Glad to see you. And we'll
all
see.
Right.
Because we have a great guest.
We have a great guest. Let's just move right along. I would not say that most of this news today is all that interesting. I mean,
right. So we can get through it quickly.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a couple things you sent me. No, we're not gonna have time for this.
Right.
And so out it went. But the interesting thing, it's kind of funny. It's Blue Origin just announced a new employee stock plan. But not everyone is happy about this for some reason. They're trying to, Ars Technica is trying to review the material and connect with employees. And some of the early reviews are not positive, with one employee going so far as to describe the plan as pure effing trash.
Right.
Yeah, it's, and I guess it's not hard to see why some folks feel gun shy or disillusioned, because the previous stock plan, which ended up being essentially worthless, fostered this lack of trust. Now they're looking at the new one, and it says it has a more serious intent, and it's set up in a manner similar to other stock option plans in the industry. But he's trying to right the wrongs. It could be a vehicle for that, but so they're revamping the program, and not everybody, everybody's skeptical. But the good news is a lot of people feel strongly about the company and its mission at Blue Origin.
Yeah.
But they also have, it's basically FOMO, fear of missing out, when it comes to life-changing wealth being accrued by their peers.
Right. Like they're looking
companies
across the street at SpaceX, and a lot of Blue employees are former SpaceX employees where they went there, they did the work on the SpaceX anvil, and it was hard. It's a hard place to be. And then they were like, all right, I would like a life and a family and live happily ever after and still do space. And so they came to Blue. That is a common story. But Blue doesn't really have the same kind of profit motive, right? It is structured entirely differently. It is funded entirely differently. And Bezos is in no hurry to cash in. So he's driving that bus.
Right. And so in fact, one of the interesting things is that they're saying in the new plan that vested stock options can only be exercised following a qualifying liquidity event.
That's pretty typical language, but where is that going to happen? How is that going to happen? There's
qualifying liquidity events can include IPOs, a sale, a merger, a qualifying external funding round, and company-sponsored tender offers.
again, where is that going to come from?
Yeah.
When Blue was started, Bezos was in the top 5 wealthiest people in the world. Clearly, SpaceX has kind of pushed him out of that list, but
by a big margin.
Yeah, by a big margin. I would be a little unhappy with this. Pure fucking trash. That's I think that's the quote of the week as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And look who's come in since we started talking about this. Joe Pastrito is here. This is great. I don't get to see him as much. It's great to see you, Joe. Ajay Kothari is coming in.
Hey.
Probably to make up for the fact that he can't make it on Monday. And so I'm going to give him a hard time.
Right.
I love you, man. Thanks for being here.
Although Joe is telling us that LinkedIn is stuck, but YouTube is working. That happened a couple weeks ago too. We'll look into that. Thanks, Joe. We didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of our folks are coming in from YouTube now, so it's yeah. Anyway, I'll just go through the next one really quickly just to get past it, because finally Google's SpaceX stake was revealed for the first time, and they have a 6.11 stake in SpaceX. Disclosed to Alaska regulations. The stake diluted to approximately 5% post-merger with XAI is valued at $100 billion based on a true trillion valuation.
Yikes.
So,
yikes.
Yeah.
Good for Google.
Yeah, good for them. Yeah, they got in, I think, in 2015. So they've been adding stuff ever since. And even with the dilution, they have 5% stake. That's pretty good. They're going to do okay.
I think they're all right. I think no one's worried about Alphabet going under anytime soon.
No,
but new $100 million in value realized gains. Yeah, that's
okay. Well, now
what's another $100 million to Apple though? I mean to Alphabet though, really.
What do we buy now? Right?
Exactly.
Okay. So Turion Space raised $75 million, and they plan to spend it on improving its spacecraft production rate and its reconnaissance capability. But why that matters? Turion is one of the 14 companies really recently selected by the Space Force to compete for work on the Andromeda program. So that's
we talked about that last week on Monday or Thursday. So this is just a follow-up from that. Yeah.
Yep. That's what that is. Okay. Blue Origin is going through the regulatory hurdles, and they're only a step closer to launching New Glenn from Vandenberg. So very soon.
I think that is probably a pretty big deal.
Yes.
I don't want to skip over this one too much. Having a second location on the West Coast, SpaceX has been launching out of there for a while. A couple other folks have been trying, but they're building a greenfield development specifically for Blue, and that's the kind of thing. That's the kind of competitive signal we want to see in the industry. Because it can't always be the SpaceX story. So I'm really pleased by this. I think that's
so it gave the company permission for construction and future launch operations at Launch Complex 14 at Vandenberg. So that's going to be huge.
Yeah,
that's going to be huge. It's a critical milestone for the Vandenberg spaceport for them. So and it's taking the next step to further develop heavy and super heavy launch capabilities at Complex 14. So
that's what we want.
That's what we want. It's what everybody wants.
Well, and that's the only way to increase cadence, because as we've talked many times before, Florida is running out of room. So the only way that Blue can increase our cadence, that anybody can increase cadence, is we need to build out an expanded East Coast, West Coast launch facilities.
And it still underscores that big problem with all those, how many hundreds of millions or billions were spent developing spaceports for horizontal launch.
Right?
Yeah.
That feels like a bad idea.
And now, in hindsight, 20 years later, oops.
Yep.
That's not easy to re-engineer.
Seattle is thinking about building a spaceport. Like it's there was a big contingency from Space Northwest that went to symposium this week specifically to start talking about, can we build a spaceport in Seattle? And I love the idea, right? Home sweet home in my backyard. Blue is here, Stoke is here.
Yeah.
I think it would be giant game changer, but I don't know if it's very practical. So I'm hoping they're successful. I really hope they are, but I do wonder about it, right? But East Coast, West Coast facilities, we need them. Middle of the country, I don't know. That's a harder requirement.
Right. Interestingly, I mean, the reason way back in the past, 60 years ago, we were choosing these places to launch from because we wanted that 23-degree orbital inclination.
Right. Yep.
We wanted it a lot, and we still use it a lot even today, because that's where the spaceports are. So I don't know what if you can, because probably the most optimum inclination from the Northwest would be some other number I can't even fathom.
It's polar orbit or nothing.
It could be polar, but also because the Russians launch out of Kazakhstan or someplace, and they go to 57 degrees inclination, where the ISS happens to be, for the Russians. And so it's okay. What other inclinations are great for us, and how can we use them, and what is the economics of it? I guess is the question. So there's that going. Very quick one. Time Magazine, only in April, they didn't wait till the end of the year. They published a list of the 100 most influential people in America for 2026. And guess who? Wynne Shotwell, one of us. Hoorah.
Yeah, exactly right. I love her.
And Ariana wrote it herself.
No, Ariana Huffington wrote it. Like, that's a pretty.
Ariana Huffington wrote it herself.
Yeah,
the Post wrote that article.
She's great. I met her just one time. Gosh, it had to have been 15 years ago. And the line out the door. Let's see. It would have been University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana campus. The SED, Students for Exploration and Development of Space, held their annual Space Vision event, which is a super fun event. Shout out to SEDS. It's always in November. It's a really great show. And it's a great event. And she's there, and she's not all that well known yet. Not really. They haven't really hit their stride. And it was a line out the door to give her their people's resumes, and she was just like, take absolutely everybody, we need everybody. And now, I didn't know this until I read this article, it's 23,000 people at SpaceX. So hats off to you. I'm impressed as hell by her.
Yep, absolutely, good for her.
Yeah,
and I hope I see her at a conference again this year. I just want to say hi. We haven't caught up in a while, so
Reed Weissman, Commander Weissman from Artemis, also made the list, but he's not a commercial space guy. He's a NASA guy, but still, it was great to get him up there too.
Absolutely. Okay, NASA spaceport. We still have like 6-8 minutes. Okay, next up, NASA selects Voyager for the 7th private mission to the space station. They're starting to NASA's starting to love these private astronaut missions. I guess they're really accelerating the growth of a lot of new ideas and industries and tech that strengthens our presence in LEO. Sid Isaacman. And we've got 3 providers now selected for private missions. NASA's doing everything we can to send more astronauts to space and ignite the orbital economy. And this is Voyager's first selection. for a private astronaut mission. So this will be interesting for them.
Yeah, we love these guys. We were, I won't say we were in the room when Mamber said, we should send out little CubeSats on the ISS, which is the beginning of nanoracks, and nanoracks just grew and 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 became a publicly traded company at Voyager. So it's really kind of remarkable to see that 15-year voyage. I'm going to use that on purpose. The 15-year voyage from where they were at a Space Frontier Foundation meeting all the way to the New York Stock Exchange to living the dream that they want of building out their own private space station because they outgrew the International Space Station. So so remarkable this journey.
Yeah. Joe says, Google won't even notice.
It's true though. Yeah. I saw some of I'm just going to put Joe's comment up on the screen for a second. Going back to the comment about a new $100 billion. They've got 126 on hand right now, so we'll just add to that war chest. Good for them. Yep.
Next thing. Here's the big one. Amazon.
Wait a second. Hold on. I didn't know this about Veronica. She worked with nanoracks on the last 2 space missions. I didn't know that, Veronica. Thanks for that little detail.
The last 2 shuttle missions.
I'd love to talk to you about that some more.
Yeah.
Good for you. Good for them. Good for everybody.
Right. I remember that last one. I was in touch with her a lot during that very last one.
Yeah.
So heard from me a lot of insider video and stuff. It was nice. That was cool. Anyway, Amazon is buying Globalstar, $11.57 billion, because they are very, very desirous of taking on Starlink. They think with Globalstar they can actually do more and charge less. So,
what do you think of this deal? Do you have any thoughts on it? Because they're only getting 24 satellites, and that's Globalstar's 24 satellites, and Amazon has only 200. Is this a spectrum deal? Is this a locations deal? Because I don't understand what this deal is.
It might be, or it's some kind of special capability that we don't know about that they want to acquire, and they're willing to pay big bucks to get it. That would be my first thought, because usually a deal like that, that's how it works. They have when was it Northrop Grumman bought Orbital ATK? There were specific things that Orbital ATK was doing that Northrop was willing to pay almost any price to get a hold of.
Wow.
And for a very simple reason. Jim Armour told me about it. It was like they were beating Northrop at everywhere they were competing for a contract. They were beating Northrop handily and undercutting them. And one of the big reasons they acquired those guys was to find out how they did it. And when they had that first meeting, they were telling them this is how we did it. Well, we don't have to do this part. Well, I thought we always had to do that part. No, that's way too expensive. Cut that out. And then it went down a list of things that they just would not do that everyone else in the industry was doing.
Okay.
And that's what put them over the edge every time.
Yeah, but I wouldn't put.
Well, of course you have to do that and this and this. No, you don't.
I wouldn't put Globalstar in that like super innovative category. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's for the Apple contract. I cannot figure out what this deal is for.
Well, unless they're doing stuff off the books for DARPA that they're going to declassify and commercialize any day now.
that's not an Amazon core business. I don't understand it. I'm just going to say it. A nearly $12 billion deal that to me we don't have enough information, and I can't reconcile it.
This is an important idea though. Joe Pastretto just piped up.
Yeah.
And it's about spectrum, not the number of satellites. SpaceX paid $17 billion for EchoStar just to get the spectrum.
Okay, that's the answer then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yay, Joe. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Perfect.
Appreciate that.
Perfect.
Yeah, because the satellites didn't make any sense, and I did say spectrum and location, but I didn't think that's a pretty big premium for me as an outsider. So I was surprised by that. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. That helps me understand.
Okay. Next up, Kepler was awarded a $30.1 million prime contract for the European Space Agency Hydron, and the last three letters are capitalized, optical network. So they're cementing their role in ESA's high throughput broadband architecture, and they're going to be the prime contractor for Hydron Element 3. They're supposed to deliver a hosted payload mission designed to validate the interoperability of several optical communication terminals in orbit. So nothing easy.
Nope. Nope. We've talked a lot about how laser comm is the near future. It's not here right now. Very, very limited capabilities right now, but throughput is the key to space, is one of the keys to space.
Absolutely.
I don't know which one of the Artemis astronauts said it, but they were all marveling at just how much bandwidth they had and how much throughput they could do. So it was cool. That kind of capability, we all want it. We all want to see that.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay, and finally, Opterus was awarded a $10.2 million NASA contract to engineer a solar sail propulsion system. This is through an SBIR Phase 3 contract to provide structural deployment for their next solar sail spacecraft. And they're developing a system to deploy and control, keyword, a 1,600 square meter sail, roughly the size of a hockey rink, with 30-meter composite booms and integrated mechanisms. And delivery is planned for early 2028, so just under 2 years away.
Nice.
They're using something called a trussed collapsible tubular mast technology, a lightweight composite boom. They're designed to remain stiff and thermally stable after being tightly coiled for launch, then autonomously spool out an X-shaped configuration to support the sail. So they've done this at much smaller levels. They deployed in 80. They deployed a similar thing on 7-meter booms. So it's an 80 square meter thing. So this is going to be huge, and best of luck to them.
Right, for sure.
Okay. All right. But that's all I got for the news today. Listen, that's the stuff that stood out. There's always 200 different items you can look at, but we stand at the intersection of space and money, so that limits the stuff of interest to us and our listeners by a significant amount. But we always find something. Even blind squirrels like us will find nuts on occasion. And on that note, let's bring in tonight's guest. He hasn't been here in a while. It's been, about a year?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. Okay. Our guest tonight is Dr. Marc Levinson. He's the author of The Box, which is the book on the history and future, maybe, of the shipping container. And the last time he was on, he's not a space guy. He admits it. But it created such a firestorm of ideas that were floating around in the ether there for a month or two after this thing. I thought we'd bring him back for a redo and bring some folks in and see what they have to say about all this, because I think we're serious now. There's big money coming in. We're serious now about a circular economy, and you're going to need something like that engineered to move massive amounts of material
Yeah.
to the moon. So, Dr. Levinson, please come on in, ma'am. Welcome back, sir.
It's good to be back with you. I'm not quite sure how I fit into the blind squirrel part of this discussion, but
not you.
Put me in. Us.
A lot of other folks we know, but not you. Okay. Since you were here last, you talked. Well, I want you to just reacquaint. It's been about a year, so let's reacquaint our audience with you. If you give me like a 1-minute synopsis of who you are and how you got where you are and why you do what you do. What gets you up in the morning?
Sure. I'm an economist and historian. I have an interest in international trade and economics and transportation, and have written books on all these things. The book that I think is of particular interest here is a book I wrote originally back in 2006 and have since updated and may well update again pretty soon, about the creation of the shipping container, which is something that was regarded as a really pretty modest, pretty simple innovation. I mean, we've all seen what a shipping container looks like, and it's not all that interesting. But it turns out to have a very interesting story from developing from a concept to a profitable business, and something that's really, really changed the way the world works.
I first discovered your book 5 years ago when everybody was in lockdown and they were having a couple online conferences, and it was from folks that were kind of pioneers in the brand new Space Force. Space Force was just, not even 6 months old, and they were talking about this book. It was floating around those kind of inner circles, and I'm like, what's the point of this? Okay, all right. But I read the synopsis. I immediately got the applications. I got the book a couple days later, wolfed it down, and my little squirrel brain was like, oh, I see all of the implications of this. So I'd like you to start with that a little bit and just go into the history of it. I don't want to go details because I actually have other stuff I want to talk to you about, but give us a little bit of the history, and so we can apply it to the space sector. Like, what were the earliest days of containerization, standardization? What did that look like? They were pretty bumpy.
Sure. The idea that it's more efficient to put freight into a big box rather than handling millions of individual items is a really old one. It goes back to the 1700s. It's not a new concept. You had, during the 1920s, 1930s, you had railroads in the United States and in Europe using containers. You had some ship lines trying to use containers. The containers came in lots of different shapes and sizes. They were deliberately designed so that one container couldn't travel on another company's infrastructure. A railroad wanted a container that would work only on its trains, so its customers couldn't defect. So this remained a pretty small business, and it was not a very profitable business because everybody had the same basic problem. Okay, you've put some goods in the container, you've sent the container off, it's landed someplace else. The goods have been removed from it. Now, what do you do with the container? And the answer was, well, if it was a wooden container, you cut it up for firewood. Otherwise, maybe you turned it into a tool shed. This was just not an efficient system, and it was not cost effective. In 1956, a U.S. trucking magnate named Malcolm McLean used containers on the first modern container voyage. He adopted containers that were 33 feet long initially, and 8 feet tall and 8 feet wide, and put them on a false deck that was installed on a leftover tanker from World War II. and proved that it would work, that you could actually send freight this way, in that case down the US coast, and it would be cheaper than loading a ship. A typical ship back in those days might have a couple of 100,000 separate items that had to be loaded on. And rather than doing that, you could put the goods in containers. So this idea caught on at a small scale initially. It was a purely domestic, Florida to Puerto Rico, up and down the East Coast. Other companies got involved with the same thing, California to Hawaii. And so then there was an obvious problem. Every company that was interested in it, and we're talking mostly ship lines here, was developing a container which fit its own needs best.
Ship. Right.
And that wasn't necessarily what fit other companies' needs best. And so it was really the US
standardization within a vertical ecosystem, right?
Yeah. And here, so standardization came really at the behest of the U.S. Navy. Okay, the federal government funded ship construction, and part of the deal was that in the event of a military need, the Navy had a right to commandeer the ships and put them to use supplying the military. And the Navy rightly asked a basic question: suppose we actually have a war, suppose we get those ships, and some of them handle 17-foot long containers, and some of them handle 24-foot long containers, and some of them handle 35-foot long containers. How do we fight a war like that?
Right.
And the Navy essentially said to the maritime industry and to the railroad industry, we need a standard here. We're not going to tell you what it is, but you guys ought to get together and develop some standards. If you can't do it, we'll do it for you, but we'd rather you do it yourself. And that happened in the United States in the late 50s and early 60s, and then internationally through the International Organization for Standardization. And you think of the container as a pretty simple device. Okay, so it's a box of aluminum, but well, so should the doors be at the rear end? Should they be on the side? Should there be slots at the bottom so a container can be lifted by a forklift? How thick should the walls be? How many internal supports should there be so that containers could be stacked? There are a million little aspects to the container that only geeks and engineers are really interested in.
Right.
But all of those things had to be harmonized to get to the point that we reached in the late 60s, where you could put your goods in a container in any factory anywhere in the world and be pretty confident that that container could be handled at a port, could fit on any container ship, and could be handled at the port of arrival.
Right.
And so basically that's what transformed the container from just a simple box into an idea that had a really significant impact on the world economy.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I was curious, I forgot. When was the first big container ship launched? Because then that thing is custom designed just for this, and that's what that changed a lot of things too.
Well, the ships grew. The first container ship handled 58 boxes that were 33 feet long. So that's about 50 Stanton 40-foot containers roughly. So it's pretty small, right? And people were not experienced in this technology. The economics of it were not understood. And there were not customers lining up waiting to use containers. So this industry grew slowly as initially it was leftover World War II ships because there were a lot of those around in the 1950s. Companies started to get interested in refitting other kinds of ships that were a bit larger so they could carry a couple of hundred containers. But by the early 1960s, the industry was kind of stalled. And the reason for that was that there was a lot of money interested in getting into container shipping, but nobody wanted to do it unless there was some kind of standard. Imagine you'd sunk millions of dollars into a ship that was custom designed to handle 35-foot containers, and then it turned out that the standard was 40-foot containers and your ship was worthless. Right. No one was willing to do that. It was really in the mid-60s when there was agreement internationally on the basic standards that money started pouring into the industry. They started building bigger ships. step by step. It was not, from a couple of hundred to 10,000 overnight, but they started to build ships that could handle 1,500 containers, 2,000 containers, and then over time the ships got larger and larger. Obviously, this required investment in the ports, because initially the ports that were set up to handle containers were not set up to handle these larger vessels. It was really in the aughts, around 2006, that we started to get ships that were capable of handling 10,000 20-foot equivalent units. That's basically 5,000 highway-sized containers.
That's insane.
And since then, it's gotten bigger. So today, there's ships that can handle as much as 25,000 TEUs, and many ships that can handle 15 or 16. So you compare that to the size of the original container vessels back in the 1950s, we're a multiple of hundreds.
Yeah. Well, and these are the things that really got the guy you met earlier in the background, Sean, our producer. He really glued on to the piece about the military setting a standard and how the shipping industry grew very quickly once there was that standard. And then that led to Dr. Plata. Doug Plata has a pretty good sized community, about 100 engineers or so that are part of his space development network. It's a nonprofit that is trying to think through these problems. And then as a result of you being on the show last year, we spent the next probably 2 months trying to identify what's an easy thing that could be standardized, somewhat quickly. And they presented a paper on it to the International Space Development Conference. And we've seen in the last year, Aerospace Corp. Aerospace is a giant think tank. It's a think tank that the Air Force and Space Force and NASA and NOAA all use. They have 1,100 PhDs in that think tank. It's a big organization that does really cutting edge work, and they have invented a flat pack satellite. I jokingly refer to it as an IKEA sat, because they're trying to figure out, we've got a rocket fairing that is cylindrical, so that makes it's not a box anymore, so that automatically makes it challenging. You can't change that. You're not flying a box, so it's going to be a cylinder. But within that, what can you do? And so what they've done is they've built what they're calling disk sats, flat sats that are one on top of each other, as a way of harmonizing the system, and then they're just spitting them out as a Pez dispenser when they get to the top. So that was a pretty big deal, and that just happened this year. That's a new thing, and that's not because of our show, and it's not because of Doug Plata's team. It's just that I think that the world is starting to get really interested in this idea of standardization and containerization. So yeah, in a way, your ideas are starting to kind of get tested in the real world. So that's really exciting to me.
The military's role in this was very interesting, because they took the view that this was something the government couldn't actually do itself. It was not really qualified to decide what the standard should be. It should really just put the pressure on the private sector guys. And so what you had was essentially engineers from all the ship lines, from all the railroads, from the container manufacturers, from some trucking companies. These guys all sat around the table in smoky conference rooms for years on end. And you can imagine that the discussions to an outsider would have been a bit on the boring side. I mean, do you really care how thick the end walls of a container ought to be?
Right.
But that worked. Okay, that pressure from the military worked, because people knew that they had to come up with some result, some conclusion. Right now, there's a much more difficult situation in the shipping industry. There's a lot of interest in what's known within the industry as digitalization. And the idea of digitalization is that you adopt standards for the flow of information through a supply chain. Okay. So here, at least in theory, the idea is that there's a constant flow of information from the time a product leaves a factory through the transport chain to the port, to the on board the ship at the other end of the voyage when it's unloaded and taken off to a distribution center. And so anyone would have access to real-time information about where their goods are and what the temperature of their goods is and anything else.
Yeah.
And these efforts, digitalization, have moved pretty slowly because there's not this external pressure. There are a lot more players than there used to be. I mean, more countries involved, more companies involved. And there are a lot more, shall we say, trade secrets. So everybody agrees in principle that having common standards for the transmission of data would be a good idea, but they would like to have this according to the way they're doing it themselves, and they'd like to be able to keep some of their information away from other companies that are in the industry. So it's been start and stop. Some aspects have gone forward, some have not. But again, it's when you get down to the nuts and bolts. I guess nuts and bolts is a bad metaphor here to talk about digitization. But think about things like, what does it mean to say that a ship has arrived in port? Well, it turns out that different ship lines have different definitions for when the ship has arrived in port. And so it's hard to have a standard until everyone's agreed on what arrival of a ship in port means.
Yeah.
Wow.
And multiply that by 10,000 different factors, and you can see some of the complexity.
Is that different per shipping line, per port? Because that adds up pretty fast.
Some ports have developed their own data management systems that may not speak very well to those at other ports. The ship lines share information, but not necessarily as much as some people might like. And so things are not necessarily seamless. In theory, you could have the arrangement of containers on a ship when it's loaded correspond to the way in which that container is going to be unloaded 10,000 miles from now. And so it makes the whole process more efficient. And then the containers in the terminal would need to be stacked in a way so that they can be loaded on board the ship in that order and then unloaded at the other. Well, that's the theory, but the practice is just a little bit more complicated. And
well, that's kind of interesting, given that first you say that all these is kind of almost like anarchy. Everybody has to can make their own decision and their own determination of when they arrive or not, and what to do accordingly. The Navy in the 60s said, well, we don't want to set the standard. We want you guys to do it. That didn't stop governments around the world from getting together and setting standards arbitrarily on their own for commercial aviation right after World War II. I'll give you 3 examples. They all sat down. France set the standard for what sea level is. There's a certain area, it's this very calm inlet in their country, and it's always been very extremely stable in terms of its height. And so they use that as the standard for what the deck is. And then, what was it? It was, of course, Britain decided what the universal standard of time was going to be. Greenwich Meridian was right there. When it got around to America, they said, what do you want? We beat them all. We said, we want everything to be in English.
Right.
And 80 years later, you got a guy flying on Ghana Airways going into Singapore, and they're both speaking to each other in English.
Yeah. So we've got about 10 minutes left here. I know that you don't know our industry, but what would you take some guesses here? What would you think would be some things that we need to be paying attention to? I liken us to those early days when there were strikes, where there were longshoremen that were losing their jobs because everything was chaotic and mismatched. There's a pretty famous example of some missions that have failed because one team was using imperial inches and the other team was using centimeters, right? Metric centimeters. It's insane that kind of error can still happen, but it did not all that long ago. So what would be some things that are like, okay, you absolutely have to solve this? I don't think we're at the stage of the digital standardizations yet, although there is a company locally in Seattle that's pulled in $50 million to work on the digital standardizations amongst contractors. So that is we are starting to see something there. Right, Veronica's telling me it's the Mars Polar Lander that crashed because of a metric malfunction.
Yeah.
But what would be things that, using the shipping industry as a template, what would be things that we should be paying attention to now?
I guess I would make a couple of comments based on total ignorance, but of the space industry. One thing is that there is definitely an issue with standards of lock-in.
Yeah.
And you have this now in the shipping industry. Okay.
Yeah.
The size of the containers was set back in the early 1960s, when in most parts of the world, road travel meant on 2-lane highways, and railroads were really not equipped to handle containers that they'd never needed to. And of course, now all over the world, you've got motorways with wide lanes and multiple lanes, and trucks can carry much longer loads, but ships can't. Okay, we still have 40-foot containers because you have all of this capital, and so we're sort of locked into this the 40-foot container now, because nobody's going to scrap 2,500 container ships in order to use larger containers.
Right.
And so you have this weird business in many ports in the United States of taking these 40-foot containers of imports, taking them to a railroad yard or a truck yard, removing the contents from those containers, stuffing the contents into a 53-foot container, and then shipping the 53-foot container domestically. Okay. So the container was originally invented to eliminate a lot of the cargo handling, but now you're handling the cargo once more to move it from one container to another.
Wow.
Kind of crazy, yeah, but that's because we're locked in. So one thing I'd say is you want to think about the lock-in, and I guess a related thing is, do you really need to standardize everything?
Right.
The negotiations might be a little better, a little easier if you can identify things that it's crucial to standardize and things that some diversity wouldn't hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it might mean there are just fewer items to bang heads over.
Yeah.
Well, we're having knife fights in the industry over the size and shape of I'm going to call them gasoline ports, right? If your car and my car had a different shaped nozzle and a different connecting point, that's not very good for the overall industry. We're having those problems. There's starting to be there are a couple industry leaders that are starting to figure out that we need a USB port for space, some sort of universal serial bus for space, and those things, little small breakthroughs are starting to happen. But there aren't enough consortiums working on these individual problems necessarily. So it's a little tricky. We're not there yet.
I'll give you an example of something that proved really unnecessary to standardize.
Okay.
The original standards for the shipping container foresaw a container that would be 8 feet tall, from the floor to the roof. Mm-hmm. Well, so if you think of how containers are used now, if they're on railroad cars or on truck trailers, truck chassis, or if they're on board ships, why does the height really matter? Okay, if you've got containers with different widths, you've got a problem because they're not going to fit in the cells in the container ship, right? If you've got containers of different lengths, you've got a problem because they're not going to fit in the cells in the container ships. But if you've got containers of different heights, but the same lengths and widths, they'll fit in those cells on container ships.
Yeah.
And so now you have in common use, you have containers that are 8 feet high, 8.5 feet high, 9 feet high. And it's possible to have some diversity in that aspect, even while you would not want diversity about the width.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Of course, the basic problem still, at the end of all this, when we talk about shipping containers, I love to talk about them, but we're still putting square pegs into round holes. We've got spaceship fuselages that are circular, and we're trying to put stuff in there and do it in an efficient way. And you think, oh, the shipping container would be great for this, but they're square shipping containers, and you put them inside the fairing. There's a lot of room left to pack other stuff around it, and you don't need to ship that many teddy bears to lunar orbit. So it's not like it's an efficient a way as we would like to move things. Mm-hmm. And Sean saying that was my argument with Doug,
right?
And so, but then if you want to build something that actually works, you have to run it down a rod or something, and it becomes toroidal or just donut shaped. And how practical is that out there when you get to the other end?
The constraints in say ocean shipping are obviously quite different. But one interesting thing that happened after containerization is that a lot of companies redesigned their products because then the question became, how many of these bottles of dish soap or how many of these toys in a package could fit into a cardboard carton, and how many of those cartons could fit into the container? Yes. Right? Because you were paying for the space. And so you wanted to fill it efficiently. And so that issue kind of got resolved simply by the economics of it, that the individual shippers had an incentive to reshape their products to make the best use of the container.
Cool. Very
that makes
cool.
sense. Yeah.
We only have 3 minutes left. I wanted just a quick question about financing. At what point does standardization help with industrial finance, right? I mean, this is a show about money and space. So at what point was that technology financeable?
Well, the technology has changed over time, and different parts of it are financeable in different ways. Commercial lending commercial lending for ships has really not been, has been much less extensive in recent years because there's a lot of government subsidy involved in shipbuilding and ship mortgages. On the other hand, a lot of container ownership now is in the hands of specialist finance companies. In aviation, many airplanes are owned by leasing companies. Well, many containers are owned by container leasing companies, and they arrange their financing and frankly, this is in some ways it's a problem for certain things. There's a lot of interest, for example, in having technology embedded into containers, smart containers as they call it. Well, most containers are rented by the shipper for a period of time, maybe for a single trip across the Atlantic or the Pacific, maybe for 3 months or maybe for 6 months. And so you've got some technology on the container. It costs more. I'm shipping a low value product. I don't want to pay extra for that technology. So now if you're owning the leasing company, you've got this fleet of containers, and some of them are not going to be appealing to me because you're going to want to charge a rent that's high enough to cover all the technology installed in the container, and I don't want to pay for it. Whereas other customers may want more technology in the container.
Right.
So it can complicate things.
Fun, very fun industry. I think we have a lot to learn from it. You said you're going to be, you might update your book. If you do, we'd like to be involved with that.
For sure.
Absolutely. And on that, Dr. Marc Levinson, author of The Box and all the iterations that will come from that, a guy, an unknown inspiration for 100 space geeks around the world, trying to take that concept that you know so much about and convert it to something absolutely useful in settling the moon and maybe other places in the solar system. Marc Levinson, thank you so much for being here. I think the first time that somebody actually launches something that utilizes some of those concepts and achieves something, we're going to have you back on to talk about it. And I love to
Thank
give
you very much. I'm very pleased to be invited. Quite an honor.
Okay. Okay. On Monday, are you ready for this? The unknown quantity, if you didn't know, marks its 100th show, believe it or not. And we are doing a 90-minute special on Monday to celebrate. We've got some special guests coming in. We want to have everybody coming in. People who've been on, everybody who's been on the show before, we want them to come in. We want all our fans to come in and join the fun, and whatever tomfoolery comes out of it, we're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be a great show. And so don't miss us this coming Monday. And for that, on that note, from the news desk at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance for Michael Lane and Sean Key, I remain Thomas Andrew Olson. Keep watching the skies.